Daniele has prepared something about the impacts of cryosphere involution on hydropower production. So Daniele, maybe we can find your presentation.
Yes, sorry. Just so thank you so much, thanks to the organizer, to Politecnico di Milano, ciao Maurizio, and thank you to all of you for being there. I will just show very few slides covering the topic as assigned here, which is the effects of water and specifically hydropower. So this is a very famous paper from some years ago from town, just quantify the importance of melting glaciers in many countries worldwide. What was of interest to me here is that the Po River, well, according to the specific peaks, which is another, you know, more or less introduced at that time, an indicator combining water coming from glacial melt and the population living in a certain catchment. This number here puts, you know, around sea, which is Amudari River, Indus River, Ganges River, and then Po River. So this topic is also very important for us to lower. Somebody before, I think Tobias, but someone else, they just said, well, now glaciers are melting at some point, so it's a nice party because we have a lot of water. But then sooner or later, the bedrooms. Well, in Europe, I think, and in Italy for sure, it's bedrooms already ever since 2 years, because as you can see here, these are a number of catchments in northern Italy, and it includes water by melting glacier and melting snow, etc. And the acronym JAS stands for July, August, and summer, and September, sorry, which is summer. And this grayish greenish and yellowish color, the ace, in reality, they more or less mean that in the last 1 century or so, there was a large decrease of available water during that season. There has been a slight increase maybe in winter because of a trade of rainfall for snowfall effect, but of course decrease in summer because of less melting season snow and less sanitation. So this is somewhat of a demonstration of what everybody is saying. Probably stream flow will decrease, but in fact it's been increasing in the last 90 years or so. This is a paper from 2014 that you can find online. I think it's on Francis and Water Resources. What Guglielmino was referring to, in fact, by talking about hydropower is this paper that we published some years ago, and we tried to quantify in a very straightforward manner the contribution of glacier and seasonal snowpack melt to the hydropower production in northern Lombardy and specifically in the island Valley. Well, all of these blue areas here are, of course, glacier cover at that time, and all the yellow dots are basically power plants, hydropower plants. And the most difficult part here was to connect the dots by trying to understand water melting when is that used? Because of course you know that hydropower does not simply exploit water coming from one catchment, but basically water is taken in pipes and ducts and moved everywhere, and therefore it's not so easy, you know, to make a straightforward computation. However, we tried to connect the dots a little bit, and we came up with an estimate of the amount of water available for hydropower within each of these plants, and then we made basically a lump of these things. And what we came out with was this chart here, where you can see basically with the black diamonds, the percentage of water basically coming from rainfall for hydropower production, and then the black square below, you can see the percentage of water coming from melt of snow. You should look at the right, sorry, the left y-axis, given the percentage. So meaning that especially in the Alto region, which is in the northeastern part of the Lombardy region, let's say 10% or so of water for hydropower production comes from glacier melt, but also if you look at the black squares, which is melted snow, we can see that more or less 40% or so of hydropower production comes from seasonal snow cover. Of course, maybe the total amount of water may remain unchanged, but so far the share of water used for hydropower is, as we can see. Of course, glacier water is supposed to be, fading away in a relatively short time. Seasonal snowpack is instead an amount of water that can be seen even as forward, but we do not know exactly how the distribution in time of this water will impact hydropower. And this probably should be studied case by case, and I'm just showing you one case of an hydropower plant that we have been studying recently. We also made the cover of this number of water. That was fun actually, because you can also see a very nice picture of the Morasco, which is a big town just near the Sessione reservoir. Well, the scheme that we sort of apply is, as you can see here, climate change, impact on hydrological regime and catchment and glacier dynamics, etc. But there is also some point with the electricity market, which is the demand and price of energy, which I'm not going to deal with here, but of course it's also very important to know that, because of course, paradoxically, if you would get, I don't know, very little water for hydropower production, but there was no requirement, it would not be a problem. Okay, so the electricity market basically goes with the, let's say, economy, so the internal product of a certain country, etc., plus basically the temperature, because of course temperature is a proxy driving the demand for electricity. Most intuitively, of course, in summer, for instance, for cooling, etc., but it's also used in winter as a proxy for requirement of course, heating. Okay. And then we put all the pieces together and we come up with how one can manage optimally a power plant to cope with the hydrology regime and demand, and then come up with production. Why is this important? Because of course an hydropower manager would not produce energy when this is not required and when this has a low price. So basically one has to match the availability of water and the price of energy at a certain time, and then couple to optimize the revenues. So this is another interesting point. An hydropower producer wants to maximize the revenues, not the production. Okay? So it's on gain, which is optimized, not the actual use of water. Okay? Well, this is an interesting case, by the way. For the Italian people, you can go and watch this movie, 1955, by a very famous director, Ermanno Olmi, Divide in China, the dam of the glacier. And at that time, when it was constructed, it was the highest dam in Europe. And now I think it's maybe the third highest, maybe highest dam in the world. Now I think it's the third or fourth highest dam in the world. This is a picture from a Swiss magazine at the end of the 19th century of the cover of the glacier, and this is in 1954, where basically the ice was basically coming out of this lake, which is now present. This is an animation. Let's see if we can make it work. Okay, this is going. So red line below is the worst case temperature scenario, green is the best case, and upstream you see the dynamics of the glacier projected in the future. And of course, in the left part, the glacier has already vanished, and on the right part, the glacier is still there. And well, here you have an estimation of ice thickness in the year 2000. So basically, using IPCC scenario as usual, I think here under assessment report 5, we sort of projected forward the hydrology of the glacier in order to evaluate the release of water, etc. This including, of course, snow contribution and so on and so forth. Okay. Sorry. So very quickly, in this chart here, you can see in the lower panel, in the dashed line, the present energy production monthly, and in the several colored bars, you see scenarios of production according to those climate models, VCR, income states, etc., and different RCPs. Of course, let's say, indicators of the magnitude of climate change impact. And of course, 8.5 is the worst one, or business as usual scenario. 2.6 would be very optimistic scenarios. That is, for instance, if the targets from Paris Agreement are actually met, okay, at the end of the century. You can see clearly that production now is, somewhat homogeneous, with some peaks maybe in summer and a little bit in fall. And in fact, in the future, slightly, I would say, visibly change of dynamics will be seen, because during the coolest month now, the chillest month now, much less production would be required, because of course increasing temperature would make lower the request of energy for heating. On the other hand, during even March and ever since August, for increased temperature, more energy would be used for cooling, which would mean basically a very large shift of energy production, of course, in the central months of the year. And this is already, as I said, depending on demand and availability of water. What is interesting here is the relative change yearly, which is on the bottom left. It is in Italian, sorry, but you can see clearly that the yearly variation is always negative. And of course, within different scenarios, it is different. At the half century, minus 15 or so in the worst case, and at end of century, minus 13 or so in the best way, in the worst scenario, sorry. I don't have time to display here, but one can also relate, for instance, how this variation of energy may be related here and in other catchment that we studied in Italy with other power exploitation, is more or less related to the loss in magnitude of ice cover and the loss of magnitude in precipitation, etc. We can say generally that whenever lower precipitation will be observed in the future, of course, production will decrease proportionally, and decrease of production will be observed because of glacial non-wasting. Okay, so the climate change will affect, okay, bring a message. Climate change will affect the water energy nexus, of course. In Italy, we have large production of hydropower in high altitude areas because you can exploit the very high, large vertical jump. Of course, you can also produce in the lowlands. However, you need largest plants with much smaller vertical jump. However, in the high altitude, where I think in Italy at least 400 or so large hydropower reservoirs are present, we are expecting a large decrease in energy production. Of course, some adaptation strategies may be used. For instance, we are not considering near-back pumping, which is still possible, of course. Not in this specific catchment in Sessione, but maybe in other catchments could be done. If you want to know more about our activity, you can refer to this website, Climate Lab, which is the Interdepartmental Laboratory on Climate Change at Politecnico di Milano, where you can find lots of pages with lots of information about our papers, our work, our projects, etc. So you are referred there for further information. Thank you very much.